The rank hypocrisy of the Andrews government here in Victoria has been an almost daily display during the pandemic. It was the Andrews government that said no to the Warrnambool mum, Sky Medden, when she asked if family and friends could attend the funeral of her 8-year-old son Cooper after he tragically drowned on a school camp. It was the Andrews government that said no to Katrina Anderson's request to travel to Melbourne to be by her daughter's side as she battles breast cancer, even though the Sydney mother is fully vaccinated. It was the Andrews government that said no to 79-year-old Kevin Davies' request to come back to Victoria to see a cardiologist after he suffered a heart attack, forcing him quite literally to set up camp in Albury. Now it's been revealed that one of their own, Labor MP Danielle Green, whose seat is in Yan Ye and it's in Melbourne's northern suburbs, she's been living 300 kilometres away in a house in regional Victoria while on leave to care for her husband. For his reaction, I want to bring in the Shadow Finance Minister, Victorian Liberal MP, Matthew Guy. The Premier today, he was asked about why Danielle Green was allowed to leave Melbourne and Katrina Anderson wasn't allowed to come into Melbourne. Let's have a listen.
It's been a well-publicised case of someone from Sydney wanting to come to Melbourne for the best of reasons. Sadly, that's not possible because Sydney poses a really significant risk. The risks we're talking about are not comparable. Like the word cancer is in both of those stories. It's tragic, but they're not comparable.
Now, we all wish Ms Green's husband all the best. Of course we do. But why is there one rule for members of the Andrews government, another rule for ordinary Victorians, Matthew Guy?
Peter, that's the question every Victorian wants to know. The Premier kept saying we're all in this together. Clearly, we're not all in this together. I mean, we've got Parliament being told we're not critical. Small business isn't apparently critical. Kids going to school isn't apparently critical. Mental health of Victorians, 6.5 million of us, that's not critical. But apparently what is critical is that government big unionised building sites keep being allowed to go ahead. So what we see is just the Premier having favourites, playing favourites, and the state government not governing for all of Victorians. I mean, we need a path out of this. After 200 days in lockdown, Melburnians want a path out of this. And when you pick stories like this, as the Premier's done, and glibly bat them away, you know, it's no wonder everyone thinks now that he is governing only for the PR and not to solve COVID.
There's a lack of clarity. 200 nights, you're absolutely right. Cumulative terms, we've another 7 and we pass London, the worst in the world in terms of a state or country or city, in this case, locked up. The worry I think Victorians have is that we don't know what success looks like. He's not committing to releasing us at points in the target, in vaccination targets. He is saying that he's still chasing zero COVID. Well, we got to zero COVID about 4 weeks ago on the Wednesday, and by Thursday night, less than 24 hours later, we were all locked up again. So what does success look like?
Yeah, that's exactly the point, Peter. Victorians, and particularly here in Melbourne, want to know what's the end game? Well, it's very clear. The end game is what National Cabinet has agreed to, and that is when we get to 70% of vaccinations, life's got to return with restrictions back to normal, and that's what National Cabinet agreed. Now, that's got Labor leaders on it, Liberal leaders on it. They came to that agreement. Now you've got these rogue premiers, and Daniel Andrews and Mark McGowan, who say, actually, National Cabinet doesn't apply to me. I'll make the rules up as I go. Well, that is completely undermining the spirit of what National Cabinet's about, and more the point, what I think Australians want to see from National Cabinet. You know, in Victoria, things are very straightforward. We need to get our quarantine facilities built. They should have been built 12 months ago. We need rapid testing so that we can get on with some of our big events like the Spring Racing Carnival. We need to treat our schools as bubbles so that we don't close schools in Narre Warren when we've got a problem 70 kilometres away in Bacchus Marsh. And we need better health protocols in our hospitals. And from that, agreeing also to the National Cabinet principles, you know, we should be able to return somewhat to a more normalised life and avoid these lockdowns, which seem to be the government wants to. I mean, the Premier seems to be gleefully getting on with these lockdowns and enforcing lockdowns. There is a path out. National Cabinet has defined it. We just need premiers like Andrews and like McGowan to stick to what National Cabinet agreed to rather than going rogue and doing their own thing.
There's a $3.5 billion blowout in the Westgate Tunnel. We don't know when it will now be completed. We've got a secret report into terrible health consequences from our young people, teenagers in particular, out of lockdowns and went out locking out parks in Victoria, if you can believe it. There was an extraordinary report in The Age over the weekend about all the Andrews loyalists have got all of these public service jobs at institutions right around Victoria. The high public service numbers, that they were formerly political advisors in his personal office. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, it was damning reading. His own office, 87 employees. I worked for a Prime Minister. He had a whole country to run. He only had 50-odd people on his books. This is a police state. This is an extraordinary state here in Victoria. What's your reaction, Matt Guy, to where we are right now as a supposedly transparent democracy?
Peter, I've long said this. Unless you're here in Victoria, and particularly in Melbourne, it is hard to fathom the extent of the politicisation of government and every structure that relies on government here in Melbourne. And it doesn't just extend to government. It goes to industry groups. It goes to big sporting groups, that they are all rolled up in this, the language of the state government, in the language, frankly, of the Premier, because this government is a one-man band. It's been a one-man band from day one. It remains a one-man band during COVID. I mean, I still am yet to see I stand with Mark McGowan or I stand with Andrew Barr. There's only I stand with Dan, because it's all team. It's all part of the PR and the spin. This government in Victoria is just one great big PR machine. It doesn't produce successful results economically. Its infrastructure projects are all over budget. They are all late. It has literally ripped the guts out of the health and education systems while claiming the opposite. But it's all about the PR, and that's all they're interested in.
Matthew Guy, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Peter.